Hi everyone, how are you doing? Can everyone see the assignment on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have two screens and so sometimes I'm not showing the right one. So I will give about another minute to see if someone comes in. And in this one, I'm just gonna go through the assignment. And then you can ask questions at the end. Usually I make them, kind of more questions since I went through them in the video, but I don't have a video for this one yet. We just changed the class to have this assignment a few terms ago. And so there are things I still need to work on, but this is our final escape room assignment. Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, just because it's 6:30 Eastern. So if someone else comes in, that will be great. I will actually for this one, I usually don't do the recordings just because people are asking questions. So I will post the recording of this in the classroom in the announcements. So if you have something you don't want shared with the whole class, maybe wait until after we stop recording and then share that. But this assignment is going to be a group assignment. You all have groups. Maybe I should start out here. Have your groups all kind of got together yet? I thought I posted those. Your team.
You did.
Okay. I don't know what I titled it. Oh, there it is, learning teams. Sorry. Okay, you're in 3 different groups. There was unfortunately one group of 5 at the end, and I feel like always that happens. They're just randomly selected. It's not on purpose. So if you're with a group of 5, Nikki, it looks like you are, and Ashlyn, you are. I'm sorry. It was meant to work with 4 or 5 team members, so you should be just fine with 5. Sometimes there are groups of 4, just depending on the class sizes. So let's go over here to the write-up. You will do a peer evaluation. So I want to talk about that just a little bit before we talk about the assignment. The peer evaluation you're going to do on your own. And you're going to submit it to the classroom on your own. Everybody's going to submit it individually. So what happens sometimes is you don't want to say anything about a particular person. They will not see this. They will not know. I'm not allowed to share any of that information. You will just get a score and they'll get a score, and that will be that. So if there's someone in your group that does not participate, it needs to be documented here. And there's a spreadsheet that you'll fill out, much like you've done in other classes. After you fill out and submit this, you can, there's a reflection as well, and it's like a Word document. And so you'll fill out the Word document and submit the reflection to TaskStream. You won't submit that here. You're just submitting the Excel spreadsheet here. And likewise, you're just submitting the reflection to TaskStream, and you'll do that before the class ends. This peer eval spreadsheet is due at the end of week 6. The reflection is not due till the class ends. Also, you're going to submit to TaskStream your final assignment. There's two different assignments in TaskStream. One says like retired assignment or phased out assignment. I think it says phased out. So ignore the phased out one and submit your assignment to the one that does not say phased out, because we did change the class up, and when we changed the class up, they changed out the wording, and so they created a different spot for you to load it in TaskStream. So if you try to load something to the phased out one, it won't let you load it. So that'll be your sign that you put it in the wrong spot. So and what I would like you to do, I think you do this in a lot of other classes, but you're going to upload the graded one. So I'm going to make comments throughout your paper, and then please load the graded one to TaskStream. That's just easier to grade or to have there. That's what they want in TaskStream. So now that we've kind of done some of the details, I want to go through the write-up with the assignment. It's going to talk about it up here, and I'll let you kind of read through it. But you're going to write a 5-page paper. And so there are at least 5 people in your group. And so you should be able to each do about a page. Typically, there are 3 different sections. I'll give you a recommendation for how to split that up maybe. I would like you to all come together after you complete it. You have 2 weeks to complete it. It's not due this week. It's due at the end of week 6. So you have a week and a half now. You have about a week and a half to do it. And you'll probably split it up and then come together and edit it at the end. You will only have one group member to submit it. Usually it's best if the group leader submits it. Now, you don't have to have a group leader, but a lot of times it makes things easier. The group leader may combine all the sections together, may do the bulk of the editing and less writing. It's really up to you and how your group works. If you have someone that's really strong in editing, in grammar, in that sort of thing, you may want to select them to do some of that leadership and then take over more of the editing. But there are 3 questions. So what were the most critical insights in conducting your analyses? Before I go into these, they're going to have, this is kind of the subjective response. The 3 analyses you did were very objective, in that you had to have the correct answer, and there was a correct answer for everything. And in this paper, there's a lot of correct answers. So your paper won't look like anything like anyone else's in the classroom. And so feel comfortable in doing that. And I'm going to give you some examples and some ideas for each of the 3 that I have seen in the previous few terms. To give you some ideas, but if you want to go out in a completely different direction, feel free to do so. And then I'll give you some, there's a few kind of pitfalls students make. And so I want to make sure to give you those, because the students that either watch the recording or attend live don't miss those, and then you can get perfect scores. So if you maybe didn't get a perfect score in some of the analyses, you can bring it up, or you missed something on a quiz, you can really bring it up in this group paper, because it is worth so many points. So the first question is, what were the most critical insights in conducting your analyses? You can look at these individually. You can first go through the CEA. Some students have looked at the importance of collecting data before you take on a project. So for instance, in the CEA, you measured hand washing prior to doing a project to increase hand washing. And a critical insight could be that if you hadn't done that, you would have no idea whether you'd improved or not. Because I think a lot of times in an organization, we know, yeah, we're kind of falling short in hand washing. we're noticing it's not being done, but we don't actually put forth the time and also the money to see exactly where we are. And when you don't put forth the money to figure that out, you don't know if what you're putting into place is a success. And so that's really important to do. And so I really encourage you, to think about that in the CEA. If you're looking at CBA, I think one of the most critical insights to me would be thinking about the different departments, because in a CBA, a lot of times there are different departments that are fighting over their project. The 3 projects you had to choose from were completely different. And so depending on your facility and depending on what your immediate needs are, there are times when your analysis shows one thing, but you may go another direction. So you could look, was there another option that was pretty close there, or was there one option, the one we selected, was that far and away better than the others? Because you may find out, depending on the limitations of your facility, that you may be best to go with a project that doesn't really win in the CBA. So that would be something to consider. And in the CUA, we looked at the difference in utility and how our quality life years changed. And so you could look at how quality life years, think about how those are measured and how that increase in satisfaction may have made such a difference in going, with one selection over the other one, because the one that had 25% greater utility is definitely going to be a better option than the one that gave you 10% utility, no matter what the costs were. And you'll notice that one with 25% utility, it had a lot bigger price tag that went along with it. And so you could talk about kind of how there's that push and pull between cost and that utility or satisfaction. These are just ideas. You could also discuss them as a whole. You could talk about how, economically, the differences may be different than if you were looking at it from a qualitative standpoint, and you could just reference the 3 of those. You could talk about costs for each one. These are just some ideas. It's really up to you. These are some examples. Also, if you really want to dig into one of the insights, let's say you really enjoyed the CEA as a team and you wanted to really talk about the CEA totally. So do the majority of that question on the CEA, write a paragraph for each of the other 2, to where that way you're mentioning them, but you're really digging into the one side of things. A lot of students have also come in and they have brought in other analyses, maybe, another CBA that did something similar. And you could you could do a compare and contrast between ours and the one that you found in research. And the one you found in research, may be very interesting to you. While we're here, I want to go into, you're supposed to have an appendix with data visualizations and tables. What I'm looking for here are graphs, tables, charts. You could bring in any graphs, tables, charts that you receive from the research article that you look through, that maybe you're doing a compare and contrast here. You can compare and show what their results were in that area. So that would be one way to bring in research. The research element is an entirely separate rubric element. And this is probably the biggest pitfall groups make, is they either don't put anything in it, or they just kind of copy and paste some tables from the analyses that we did. There's no comparison to other research. There's really nothing kind of to add to what you've already done. And so make sure that what you're putting in there has some reference to what we're studying, but also some new information, not just the same things. And definitely sometimes groups don't put anything at all. And so that's a pretty big rubric element. And you can look at the rubric. I don't know whether after we do this, I can go see if I can pull it up to show you exactly how many points it is, but I think it's quite a few points. And that's the biggest part that students miss. You can feel free to use professional articles, you can use trade journals, You can use government data. In economics, we use a lot of government data that maybe, you wouldn't say, well, that's not peer reviewed, but it's, by World Bank, or it's by the census, or it's by, some government entity, and that would be considered completely appropriate. Our second question is going to look at other benchmarks that weren't addressed that you think could have a critical impact on improving quality outcomes. So I pulled up an article before we started today, because depending on where you're at in the program, you may not have much experience with what is a benchmark. And so here's an article, and you can look up, healthcare benchmark examples. If you don't like these, there's tons of them. Some of the common ones are mortality rates, length of stays, readmissions, could be quality. Patient satisfaction is one that I get almost constantly in these projects. So that's one that's an easy one, and it would relate to all three of the projects. It would be a really easy tie-in. If you're kind of struggling with what am I supposed to do, that one's a good one. If you notice here, this is a fun one. Adhering to protocols such as hand washing, which is, kind of exactly what we did. So let's go back to the assignment. So those would be some benchmarks that you think, maybe something they should look at. It may be something they should look at if they're having, if they're having issues with mental health. Maybe think about those readmits or the length of stay, or potential, suicide rates, something like that. Those would all be good things that you may want to consider. Like we looked at QALYs, but if it's, if we're doing mental health, a lot of times we maybe should consider, other things, things in the community that have to do with those mortality rates, and whether those are increasing or decreasing. They're increasing for mental health in the rural areas, and they used to be increasing for the urban areas, and now it's like they're increasing for the rural areas. So that might be something you would want to talk about. And then this final question, what other tools could have been used? And there's a myriad of things here. If you've taken the statistics class, you would have probably learned about ANOVA, maybe multiple regression. The ones that are used often in healthcare are cost minimization or cost consequence. Those are the two that I see mentioned a lot in this other analysis tools. And I would mention one or two and go through those. Once again, it's a 5-page paper. If you do, usually what happens is these two questions end up being about 2 pages apiece, and this one ends up being 1 page. As you're going through and splitting up the paper, I recommend critical insights, putting 2 people on this one. Each one could have a critical insight. Either each one picks, one of the analysis techniques that we studied, or, something like that. That would be a good way to split that into 2. Here, this is another good way to split into 2, the benchmarks. Each one pick a benchmark. You could do it with analysis tools as well. Pick 2 people. They could do the analysis tools. If your group only has 5, this is the one I would really cut back on. Just to, have that 1 page, 1 person. Each person is kind of responsible for a page. You can kind of see how you wouldn't overlap if you picked different analyses or different benchmarks, and how they would kind of flow together. One thing that's also that I've seen that's really quite useful for you as you move on, you will do the CBA again in capstone. I don't know if I have said that before, but you will see it again in a couple of classes from now. And so it's good to have information about what you've done, especially with the CBA, since that's the one you'll do again. And so one way, if you can't think of any data visualization you want to include, look at what you've already done and create a table. So you could create a table that has CEA, CBA, CUA, and then you write what data you collected. So, you looked at the cost, you looked at, hand washing, how much hand washing, you looked at the benefits for the CBA, you looked at the qualities for the CUA, and then you write how you determine the answers. So, whether you did a CBA ratio or you looked at the ICER in the first one, it kind of brings you back to what exactly were we doing again? And while that may not seem particularly relevant now, when you get to the next one, just having a basic table where you have in there how to calculate the cost benefit ratio as part of your table is something very easy to look back at, where you can go, oh yeah, I know, I need to figure out the costs and the benefits, and then then I can figure out my ratio and I'll know, which one to select. That's a good way to do a simple one without doing a lot of additional research on literature review. Try to think of anything else. Yeah, it says here you don't have sufficient space to address all items. That's not really my goal. I don't want you to dig into everything in just massive detail and submit a 10-page paper. If you really like to write and you're really loving doing that, that's fine. I'm going to try to move this down. But I would prefer it, if you really focused in on something. Here's the rubric. It looks like that research element, that data visualization element has 5 points. And then your research element, which is part of this data visualization, is 15. So total, they're 20 points. So that's really the part where it's easy to get off. So make sure you look carefully at that. But other than that, that's the basic assignment. Let me see if I can close out the recording without cutting you off.